to you. Okay, so this was a very Kindle heavy month, so I don't have a whole lot of the physical copies, so this might be a little bit weird. I don't have really anything to hold in my hands, and I talk with my hands a lot, but I'm gonna try not to have my hands in the video the whole time. Let's get into it. The 12 books I read in February of 2024. I'm not going to put this in order because I read a lot of series this month. I only read a few standalones, so I want my series kind of grouped together in the same section and my standalones on their own. So we'll talk about the standalones first and then we'll move into the series. But again, this is not in any kind of order. These are just the 12 books that I read in February. Of the books I read in February, I don't really want to dive too much into. I don't really want to talk too much about. I just would like to say I did read these 2 books. These are the books in question. Again, I did read both of these. I rated them, I think I rated this one a 3.5 and this one a 4-star. The next book I read is The Fury. This one was a standalone story. This was a mystery, like kind of like a Clue sort of situation. The main character kind of speaks to us as if he's breaking the third wall a little bit. He'll pull himself out of the story to give us kind of side information or back information. It takes place as you, the reader, is sitting down with the main character at a bar and he's telling you the story of his life. This book follows an ex-movie star, huge movie star, who decides to go to her own private island on a little trip with all of her friends. She ends up being murdered on that island and it turns into kind of like a murder mystery, but there is a twist at the end. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it could have easily been a 5 stars. However, I didn't like the whimsical addition at the end there. I don't know if it was whimsical, maybe more of like a, I don't know, it gave kind of like a magical aspect at the end there, and I don't know if I particularly care for it. However, it was a really good story. The next book I read is The Spare Room. This book starts off with a couple living in quarantine. She had just lost her job. She's stuck in the house. She's kind of really getting down on herself and like not in a good place in that 2020 mindset. Her fiance decides to, hey, we need to take a pause. Let's not do this wedding right now. She decides that she's going to spend some time quarantining with one of her childhood best friends and her husband, her childhood best friend's husband. She moves down there into the mansion with the 2 of them because the wife is a best-selling author or whatever, and they got this mansion, this really nice place. She moves down there to kind of find herself and really put herself out there and get back in contact with friends and kind of figure out where she wants to go from here. She comes down here not expecting to find it, but does find love in the couple, and they invite her into a throuple situation. This book then picks up with a missing person turning into a murder, turning into a murder mystery. It was pretty interesting. I don't think I would have guessed the plot twist, but I also think that quite literally no one would have guessed the plot twist. I'm not gonna say no one, but I think the plot twist was so like kind of random that I really wasn't expecting it. Like it kind of was like, it was kind of like, I'll give it to you, but I think it could have been done a little bit better. I don't know. It wasn't bad, but it could have been done better. I read this on my Kindle and I rated this a 3 stars. Next book I read in February, well, not the next book necessarily, but one of the other books I read in February was They Both Die at the End. This book follows a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old who both get a call from Deathcast in the morning letting them know that they have the next 24 hours to be alive. Both of the teenagers decide to download this app called Last Friend, where they kind of match with people who are either also dying today or people who are willing to spend their next 24 hours with someone whose last day is today. The 2 kids end up getting connected. The 17-year-old boy and the 18-year-old boy, they end up matching on Lost Friend and decide to spend their last day together. They go on this beautiful adventure, which does lead to both kids dying in the end, but along the way, there's a bit of a romance. I mean, it was a very beautifully told story. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I cried, I laughed. I really felt connected with I felt more connected with Mateo than Rufus, but I really felt connected with the characters. I really enjoyed myself reading this book. I binged it in like 2 days, I want to say. I was heartbroken, actually heartbroken when they actually came and died. I was telling myself in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to beat this. They're not going to die at the end. They're not going to die at the end. And literally the author is like, don't get your hopes up. They are literally going to die in the end. And here I am like, are they? Are they though? But I couldn't make myself say goodbye to these characters. And then once you do say goodbye to those characters, my heart actually broke. I was ugly crying, sobbing, like, oh God, this book broke my heart. This book made me feel things. This book gave me an existential crisis on life. And I hate when, you think about death too much. This book like kind of put the thought of death on my mind, but in a way that wasn't so heavy. It was very wonderfully written. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I gave this book a 5 stars. It was not my first 5-star of the month, of the year, but it was my second, and I did really, really enjoy this book. The love was done really well. The writing was really nice, and just the overall feeling I had after reading the book is more so what pushed me to giving it a 5 stars. The fact that even now I feel so emotionally connected to the characters and so strong about the words that I read on that page, it just shows me like, you're an amazing author if you can continue to make me feel things after I've already read the book, because I am one to forget the plot. I'm one to forget what I read. I will binge a book on my Kindle in a single night and be like, I don't even know what I just read, but I read it. I'm that kind of person. So when a book is able to give me that bingeable feeling and yet it still leaves such an imprint on my brain, it's a 5-star read for me. Every time. It's going to always be a 5-star read for me. And this was a 5-star read for me. This was really good. The next 3 books I read are all part of a series. We'll do them in order. First book is The Dark One, which is book 2 in the Vicious Lost Boys series. I read book 1 in January. I started off February reading book 2. I probably read, I'm going to say this entire series is 4 books. Overall reading time took me about 5 nights to finish it, I want to say. It's the vibe I was looking for at the time. I just wanted something where I didn't really have to use my brain too much. I just wanted something where I could just kind of sit back, read, binge, and just really enjoy it. Just something casual, something cute, something super cash. And I think that's what this gave me. This was at the best time for me. This month was a really good month. I read a lot of books at the exact time that I wanted to read them, and it led me to having such a good month. I mean, 12 books this month, that's more than I would say I typically read, especially in a shorter month like February. Even with the leap year, it was only the 29 days, and to just be like, oh, I read 12 books in 29 days. I've never done that. So it kind of was like, this was a great month for me, I feel like. This is a Why Choose story that follows Wendy Darling and her boys, her vicious lost boys. This is a spinoff of like Peter Pan. Hook does make an appearance, and Hook also has a spinoff series of his own coming at the end of this 4-book series. So if you're interested in that, that should be out relatively soon. I know it was supposed to be out at the end of last year, but the author had some things going on in her personal life and pushed back the release date. As of right now, we don't have a release date for the Hook spinoff, but I am super interested for the Hook and Crocodile spinoff. If you haven't read the first book, this might be a slight spoiler. Book 2 is about, as it says, the Dark One and the Dark Spirit of Neverland. I rated book 2 in this series a 3-star. It wasn't my favorite. It wasn't the most memorable. This space could have been used to prolong something that happens further down in the series, which I'll touch on. I gave this book a 3 stars. The next book in the series, book 3, is Their Vicious Darling. I rated this book a 4 stars. I liked this book more than I liked book 2. I can't tell you anything about this one because it'll spoil things that happen in book 2 and book 1, but this was probably my second favorite book in the series. Moving on to the 4th book, this could have been my favorite book in the series. The only reason it's not is because it was too rushed. Stretched out book 1 and book 2 way too long, and we could have used all of that to kind of wrap those 2 situations up in the same book. So we could have used another page or another whatever for book 4, because book 4 had so many questions that needed to be answered, so much that had happened throughout the series, that when it came down to it, for all those questions to be answered, there just wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough explanation. I didn't feel satisfied enough. I don't know. I just think book 4 we should have spent more time on, and maybe book 1 and 2 could have had a little less time. Okay, the next 4 books I read are all from the same series. I've been binging Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Oh my gosh. I read it in the chronological order. I read Assassin's Blade before I read anything. And I personally believe that you should also read Assassin's Blade first. I understand why people would want to put Assassin's Blade third, but personally, I would not have enjoyed the first and second book, or even been willing to push through the first and second book as much as I was, because I read Assassin's Blade first. Assassin's Blade going first kind of gives you a little bit of the main character's backstory, and I think having that backstory is what made me care so much for the main character. She already had this special place in my heart because I was like, oh my God, girl, what? This happened to you? You know, like I was already on her team. I was already rooting for her, starting off strong, starting in the first book of the series. And the first book of a fantasy series, especially one this long, is gonna just be world building. So it was nice to kind of have a little bit of backstory while I'm doing all of this world building that I know I'm going to be doing and character meeting in the first 2 books of the series. It was nice to be able to have that background information, that little taste of what I know is to come in the series. But anyway, I read Throne of Glass after reading Assassin's Blade. I rated this book a 4 stars, which typically the first books of any fantasy series I would rate around a 3 or 4 stars, just because I don't particularly care for the world building and the getting to know all of the characters. I'm ready to get down to it. I don't know. But once you get into it, once you read those 2 books, I feel like if I was to reread Throne of Glass now that I've read more books in the series, if I was to reread Throne of Glass now, I would appreciate it a little bit more than I appreciated it when I read it at the time. I also read book 2 in the series, which I read as book 3, and that is Crown of Midnight. I also rated this book a 4 stars. I don't know, there's somebody in this book that's given Tamlin. There's somebody in this book that was given Tamlin, and that didn't sit right with me. So I was ready for that to be over with and done and out of my way and off my brain, like, ugh. I don't know. I think I saw it from a mile away that this was going to be our next Tamlin. This book I read is Heir of Fire. This is when I really started loving this series. Once I got to this book, I was actually hooked. By the time we got here, everything started kind of pulling apart. The little cues as to where the series is going to go in the future were kind of coming at us pretty strong. This currently is my second favorite book in the series. Again, currently, because I have not finished the series to date. I'm currently reading the tandem read, which I'm enjoying, but this right now is my second favorite book in the series. This was also my first 5-star of 2024. Clap it up to Sarah J. Maas, because she did it again. She got me into reading last year, and she has kept me reading this year. I felt myself coming onto a slump towards the end of this month with all of the binging that I was doing, but she pulled me back from the edge, as she does. So shout out to that. First 5-star of the year of 2024. This was so beautiful, and I loved the continuation of the series. The next book I read, also 5 stars, Queen of Shadows. I also really love this book. I love this series. I actually love this series. I wish I could tell you more about what goes on in this book, but I really don't want to spoil anything. But if you are interested, I am currently also filming a full spoiler vlog of my tandem read experience, which at the beginning of that, I'll talk more about how I felt about each individual book. But in this, I don't really want to spoil it too much for people who have not read the series yet. But this book is my favorite book in the series so far. I love one of the characters in this book. I'm absolutely obsessed with him. I love this book. I love this book. I love this book. This book was so good. It definitely builds for what I know is going to come in this tandem read, and I'm sure it'll all kind of fall back together in the last book of the series. But this book was so beautifully written. I love Sarah J. Maas. I cannot say it enough. This has been an awesome journey. I can't believe all this time I had only read ACOTAR. Like, all this time I was so stuck on ACOTAR. I hadn't even given Throne of Glass a chance. Hadn't even given Crescent City a chance until I saw that book 3 of Crescent City was coming out and ACOTAR was going to be related. And I was like, oh, well, I might as well read all of them. And I've been reading Throne of Glass, and I have been absolutely loving it. Shout out to Sarah J. Maas. Mwah, you have my heart, girl. Those are all the books that I read. I read 12 books this month. My first 5-star this month of the year as well was Heir of Fire. My second one was Then They Both Die at the End. And then my third one, which also happened to have been in 3 5-stars in a row, was Queen of Shadows. However, I did also have one DNF. My DNF was The Paris Apartment. This book is supposed to be a mystery book following a woman who comes to town looking for her brother. I did not care what happened to the brother. I could care less who did it. I could care less how it was done. I could care less about anything relating to this book. And therefore, I felt myself being like, you know what? I'm just going to put it down because I don't care. I DNF'd this book at 18%. I was buddy reading it. My friend also decided to DNF this book, and she DNF'd this book at around 30%. Absolutely zero regrets about DNFing this book. It was my first DNF of the year. It is what it is. Okay, that wraps it up. I had 12 books this month, 1 DNF, and 3 5 stars. I really enjoyed myself this month. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.